So I already set up my template here to have the confirm button. I didn't add any logic though, but I want to start with the is the user allowed to visit a certain route task first. Now we have 3 different places where we can set up is a user allowed to enter a route check, and one place where we may set up the is he allowed to leave check. Now I want to start with the is he allowed to enter check, and the first place to set this up is here in the main.js file. Here where we set up the router, we can use our router, which we configured here, before we assign it to our instance to access it and set up the before each method here. Now, before each means execute this before each routing action, before every routing action which may occur. Here, this expects to get a function as an argument where we have the route we want to navigate to, the route where we're coming from, and next, which is a callback we can execute to let the request continue its journey. So basically, this before each function, this argument we're passing here, gets executed on each routing action. So you may use this for only very generic checks, and you should be aware that it gets executed all the time. So I can simply log global before each, so that we can see that here, or that we reach this point. Important, you have to execute next to allow the routing action to continue. If you don't do that, it's assumed that it's not allowed to continue and it will exit and will not go to the route or to the page you want it to go to. Alternatively, you could pass next false to abort the current operation and stay on the page you were at. Or you can also pass either a path or the same object you already know from router links and from this router push method. So an object where you define the path you want to navigate to. So you can also issue a redirection here with that. So these are the 3 options. Pass nothing, it continues its journey and will finally load the desired page at some point of time. Pass false, it will abort. Pass either a path or an object defining that path, including params and so on, to redirect. These are the 3 options. So here I will just let the request continue its journey. But what we can already see, if I open the console and I load this, we see global before each was executed there. If I click go to home, we see here it was executed. If I click user, here it was executed. If I click on a single user, it was executed, and so on. So this really gets executed on each routing action, global before each, set up here directly on the global router, which we pass to our root view instance. Now, this is something you might not use all the time. Sometimes you only want to protect certain routes. That is the more common use case, I'd say. So let's say we want to protect our user detail route here, this one. Then we can also add the before enter property here, which now also is a function, which you could also store in another file and simply import, but I'll write it here. And this has the same arguments as the other function had in this global function, to, from, and next. And then it works exactly in the same way. Here I say inside route setup to see where this was executed. And then again, we can call next like this to let it continue, with false to abort, or with a different path to navigate to that path, just like on the global function, but now directly limited to this route. And we can see this. If I clear my console, load here, we see global before each and inside route setup because I am on the user detail route. But if I click on go to home, we only see global for each. The same is true for the user page. Only if I select the individual user and hence go to the user detail page do I see inside route setup. So this is the next step of granularity. Here we check it on the route level. Now the last place where you can implement it is directly in the component you're navigating to. So user detail in this case. You would for this go to your root instance, and there you get, or your component I should say, and there you get 2 new methods available. One is for the other navigation guard we're going to have a look at next, and the other one is for this we used before in 2 different places. Before route enter would be the name of the method you want to execute here. This is like a lifecycle hook and now implemented by the view router. And here again with to, from, and next. And if we call next, we finally load this component. And if we don't call it, we can still abort, we can still navigate away, the component doesn't get loaded. And this is key to understand, and I want to really highlight this. As long as you don't call next here, this component is not loaded. This also means that in this lifecycle hook, you can't access your view instance, you can't access your data. So this link to access this property here will not work because this component hasn't been created yet. This is kind of a special case here. We're in this file, but this object hasn't been fully initialized, so we may not access it here. And that's key to keep in mind. If you absolutely need to access it, you can pass a callback to the next function here. This is a special case where you pass your view model, so this component instance, to a function, and in there you may now access link like this. So this is now a place where you do have access to your component, because since it's inside the next function, it's simply a callback. We pass it as an argument here, keep that in mind, which is executed once this component has been loaded. But this also means that at this point of time, the component has been created. So if you really want to check if this component should be created before creating it, well, then you have to do it outside of the next callback. And there you don't have access to the component data, which I think makes sense because it isn't there yet. So in here we could simply check if the user is authenticated. So for example, access some other file, some global service where you store this, or whatever you like. Check if the user is authenticated. So here, if true, to always allow navigation. And if that is the case, I execute next. And if this is not the case, well, then we may simply call next false to abort. Now, which will not get executed here because it's always true, but you could check whatever you wanted to check here. Actually, let's show this. If it's false and I reload this page, you see it doesn't get loaded. I'm getting stuck. So if I'm on my user page and click on user 1, I'm not getting there because I failed to pass this test here, which is always false. So let me switch to true. And if we now reload this page, now it works again because now we are allowed to continue. So this is how we can check if a user is allowed to visit a certain page. We can check it in 3 different places depending on which access we need and how granular it should be. Important to know or to keep in mind, in all 3 places you don't have access to the component you're passing it to. You only have access to the route you're coming from to and the route you're going to. And then you have this callback function which you need to execute to either abort or redirect or let the request continue its journey.